can't really look at large investments indeed without having a cooperation between the state and the private sector. I think one of the new challenges, it is really to find the way where the two sectors are not regulated or treated in a very different manner, and the new paradigm it is how do we put them together and make them work together.
Sure. Just one comment here. And the study that we commissioned, of course, we had to have a period of cutoff. 10 years seemed like a fair one. I mean, we have some visibility. And we hope that this study will be a starting point because the government right now is thinking about a longer term energy strategy, and we hope that they will take this study into account as they think about what is needed in the energy sector going forward.
Thank you. Any other comments on energy issue from anyone else on the panel? No? Okay. We have a few minutes left for any questions from the floor. Please. Is there anyone running around with microphones? Yes. Please raise your hand so they can see you. Yeah, thank you.
Diana Ursaki, OMV Law. I have two short questions. One of them is for Mr. Cătălin Păună. You had a very interesting chart, and I was wondering if you could put that data a bit into context to know if we should be very sad or just a little sad. I was curious if you could maybe make a ratio between the public spending per capita relative to income tax, corporate tax, and the property tax that people pay in other EU countries.
Thank you very much. It's a very good question. So I think that you can interpret this picture either way. You can look at the half full of the glass or at the empty half of the glass. So if you look at the full half, you see, for example, that Romania is decoupling already from Bulgaria. They've been put together for a long time there. And you also see that Romania started in this picture at somewhere below 30% in terms of GDP per capita at PPS, at purchasing power standards, controlling for other influence of other factors. And now it's approaching 55%. So I think recovering in 15 years about 25% in terms of GDP per capita is a tremendous achievement. At the same time, you can also see that we are still behind many of our European peers, and this is, like I said, is not a linear extrapolation of the past. So I think as you catch up with the rest of Europe, the drivers of growth definitely change. So we're talking about exploiting initially, say, extensively your factors of production towards moving to exploiting them more intensively. You're talking about higher value added coming particularly from the services sector, which I think is an area which should grow substantially, and from high technological complexity manufacturing sector. So this should be the drivers of growth. And that's related also to the skills agenda, because you cannot really have high value added industries in this country unless you have the people actually to maneuver those machineries. So clearly there are risks ahead, there are important risks. If you look at Portugal there, so Portugal is not doing that well. I think any of these countries could be sooner or later in that situation, depending on the quality of the policy making. So it's crucial to have good policies and sustainable over the long term if you want to catch sustainably. So if you want to look like Germany or like the UK in 20 years time, you really have to pursue the policies they pursue, and you have to have the human capital and the processes and the institutions that these countries have. So this is our challenge over the long run.
I guess my question was a bit simpler. Was it like, there's an investment of 55% GDP per capita. How much is it, for instance, what are the taxes like for the people in the Czech Republic, to know, are we actually paying more for the quantity of services that we're receiving, or we're actually paying less and it's a fair charge?
You asked two questions, actually. This is the second question. So obviously you cannot delink revenue collection from expenditure, and we have a low spending in GDP, public spending in GDP. I said this is the lowest in the European Union, and this has to do partly with the fact that we also have the lowest revenue collection. So in the long run, they have to go hand in hand. So that means that in terms of per capita spending, probably it's the lowest in Europe, one of the lowest. But again, I think those are some kind of gross measures. I think there is a lot to discuss about the efficiency of public spending, because you can have high spending in GDP and you have low efficiencies there. So we are assuming that we are on the production possibility frontiers with our economies, which is actually not the case. So I think with the current levels of spending, and in particular with the current levels of capital spending, we can achieve, I think, significantly higher growth rates, if you ask me. I was telling you earlier that we have the highest public investment, capital investment in GDP in Europe. So clearly, I think there are efficiencies there to be further explored. Then is the substitution between public service delivery and private sector, service delivery. Public and private are not perfect substitutes in a country like Romania. They may be, let's say, in Scandinavia, where you have very high public sector, but you have very high quality of public services as well, simply because they have the appropriate quality of policy making. We are not at the stage, and it's going to take years and years to get to this stage. So probably from some perspective, it may be better in the short run to leave more actually resources with those that generate them, that is the households and the company, because they probably know better how to invest their income than the public sector in the short run. Thank you.
And my second question is for Mr. Sobolewski, because he made the mistake of being optimist. And I've heard a lot about the fact that you really believe that the growth in Romania is going to be more accelerated than what some of the other gentlemen mentioned. And my understanding is that the spending and the cost of funding and the wide access to the internet are going to be some of the drivers for that. But I've heard quite a little about the competitiveness of the workforce. And I'm sure that in the long run, the previous factors that I mentioned cannot really account for the growth that an increase in competitiveness can have. So how do you see this happening, especially as you've mentioned that education is probably not going to take off very fast with the desired impact?
Yeah, I'd like really to be understood when it comes to my comments regarding education. I think that this is really crucial, but you know, I'm a little bit skeptical if it will be properly and fully addressed by the policies and by the public funds going into this sector. But also in that context, I was I would say, touched by what Daniela mentioned. She only mentioned this, but I think that it was extremely accurate, that the model of education is also changing, and it must be taken into account. I mean, the level of education and the level of innovativeness and creativity does not, euphemistically speaking, does not entirely depend on the amount of money injected into this set of goals. But it's another story. The competitiveness of the workforce. I think that yes, I agree. This is one of the main drivers for growth, and one obvious danger is hidden there. The cost of the workforce, which of course Romania has at a competitive level. But the best would be to forget about this advantage, this competitive advantage, because this competitive advantage may very easily lead us into a lot of problems in years to come. But not that soon. This is my feeling, that we still have a couple of years before this problem of the low cost of labor will become a blocking factor for the further development of the economy. But this is something that should also be, somewhere in our head, because I have also the impression that some of the countries, even in our region, may have very soon this problem of middle growth trap. So they were expanding, they were growing very spectacularly over last years. They have exploited these simple resources, and the comparative cost of labor is one of the simplest resources. Then the cost of labor went up. They started losing this competitive advantage, and if they didn't take enough care of building in the past other competitive advantages, and for sure creativity and this intellectual capital is one of the main reservoir of this growth, then these countries will have a problem, because they will be, like we could say, permanently with a big gap towards developed countries, really developed countries. So yes, indeed, I think that that you touched an extremely important point. So sorry, maybe that my answer is, when it comes to the sophistication of my answer, I feel that it is much below the sophistication of your question. But yes, indeed, this is something which can have far-fetched negative consequences if this is not properly addressed. But my point, if I said anything valuable, I think that my main point is that it's not only through money or money spending, which is important. The most important for me is to unblock the economy and the removal of many barriers which are everywhere, and if people will get more freedom for being active in business, active in science, active in social life, in NGOs, in everywhere, if this will be less costly and with more liberty, then also it will speed up the educational processes, and the whole upgrade when it comes to the level of civilization, so to speak, will be greatly accelerated because of these changes around. This is rather how I feel the problem of innovativeness, which obviously must be based on a very solid competitive educational level. In this context, also this change about smoking is important. So I'm sorry for this.
Well, the sophistication of these questions and the sophistication of the answers has eaten up the time. And since we are now about 15 minutes over scheduled time, I would propose we stop here. If you have some additional questions for the panelists, please catch them during the break. If I'm not mistaken, Dumitru, we have half an hour break now. And I would like to thank all of our panelists. Many, many thanks for your contribution and your thoughts, and many thanks to the audience as well for being patient. And I'm sorry we couldn't take more questions at this stage. Thank you so much. And another leader will lead another session. The chairman of the second session will be Radu Silviani. Thank you so much.